have a firm, hard stop to when you work. And so, okay, this is the end of my workday. I mean, the Flintstones did it. Fred Flintstone, horn went off, he slid down the tail, yelled yabba dabba doo, punched out, and went home. We don't have a time clock usually. We don't punch out. And we need to. We literally need to say, okay, this is the end of my workday.
You found your way to the Winning Tactics podcast with host Adam Sinkus. Adam discusses winning tactics with small business owners and entrepreneurs, uncovering processes and introducing the tools and solutions for enhancing the bottom line. Thanks again for finding your way to the Winning Tactics podcast, and now your host, Adam Sinkus.
All right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is my favorite day of the week because it is Winning Tactics Day. Super excited today because we have yet another great episode. I know I say that every week, but I feel like I failed to deliver. I feel like I deliver on that. But this week is something that's, I think, really real for a lot of people right now. Especially with the way the last year has gone and being cooped up in our houses and not, just not having that same level of interaction I think that we're used to. And, I think everybody's also trying to hustle a lot harder to make ends meet in some respects as well. So we are talking about burnout today. And burnout is like, it's very real. And in my opinion, it's so detrimental. Excited to have my guest on the show today, Michael Levitt. Michael, welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking your time to join us today. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. And I love your intro music, by the way. So I want to make sure I said that before. I was bouncing around a little bit. It's like, I got to get the deep track for this, man. This sounds good. This is good music to get pumped up and ready for the show. So, but anyway, thank you again for allowing me to be on the show. So, I work in the burnout space. I've been a burnout consultant for several years. A lot of it came, and we'll dive into it, I'm sure, momentarily, my own burnout journey that took place a little over a decade ago. And I saw what burnout can do to somebody and how devastating it can be. So after recovering from that, I reinvented my life and took a different path on a lot of things and noticed that a lot of people were burning out. And this was before the pandemic. And since this pandemic, we've seen those numbers skyrocket. I've seen a couple different studies from, major organizations that have indicated anywhere from 60 to almost 80% of people have identified as being burned out. That's a pandemic within a pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's so scary with the isolation piece to think about that on top of just normal burnout. And I think, small businesses in the last year have really been hit with a lot more stress than they're used to. Just from trying to figure everything out. I know, I started this podcast just to open up conversations with all my small business friends that are going, just saying, how the heck are we going to weather this storm? What are we doing to get through? And, and I could see like the real panic when we had those conversations, the reality of it. And so, ultimately it made them work harder, but that leads to, when do you work too hard and start to go over the other end of things? So let's kind of talk about, you have a little bit of a journey of why you got into burnout. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you start down this path?
Yeah, back in 2007, I was hired as a healthcare executive just outside of Windsor, Ontario. And that location is important, as you'll find in a couple minutes. But in this new role as a healthcare executive, I was required to recruit physicians, hire staff, navigate a site relocation about 6 weeks before we were supposed to open, and educate the community why our clinic was better than the existing clinics that are already in town. And for those, and small business owners definitely know this, and anybody that's ever been involved in a startup, there's a lot of time and effort that needs to go into the work that you do. Unfortunately for me, I was working basically from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week, and not really taking care of myself, not taking breaks, no activity to speak of, no exercise. My nutrition plan, pretty much breakfast, lunch, and dinner, was ordering food in a microphone, driving around the corner, paying for it, and then getting handed a brown bag. And I did that solid for 2 years, and didn't really eat well, didn't take care of myself, stopped doing things that I enjoyed doing because I was working so hard. And I basically felt that, okay, I'll just work harder and I'll work through this and eventually it'll break. Well, the only thing that broke was me. And basically, what had happened, fast forward to May of 2009, over a period of 369 days. So from May 2009 to May 2010, the following happened to me. I had a heart attack that should have killed me. I lost my job during the Great Recession. My car was repossessed. And then finally, my home was foreclosed, all in a year. And all those things happened because I was burned out. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't making the best decisions at work. When you're on unemployment, and going back to the Windsor, Ontario situation, if people aren't familiar, that's across the border from Detroit, Michigan. GM, Ford, and Chrysler, based in Detroit, were on their last legs. They were in deep trouble, and the government had to bail out GM and Chrysler. Ford was able to withstand it and didn't need as much government assistance, but GM and Chrysler, were basically a heartbeat away from going out of business completely. And those are obviously large employers in that area that have ripple effects of all kinds of different opportunities and jobs. So, needless to say, there wasn't any jobs to be found, and here I am, fresh from losing my job, after having a heart attack. And unfortunately, when you're on unemployment, as everybody probably knows, if they've ever dealt with that before, the income isn't the same. So I'm on reduced income, and I'm taking heart medication that costs $1,000 a month with no drug insurance plan. So needless to say, got to feed the family and take these medications to recover from my cardiac event. That puts a little damper on the ability to make your car payment and your mortgage payment. Now, we had worked with our creditors, and they were very graceful as far as giving us a period of time to not pay things. But unfortunately, that time ran out, and they exercised their right to take the vehicle back and ultimately foreclose the home as well. But all of those things gave me an opportunity to take a really, really deep, hard look as to how I was living. And obviously, I was not living well at all, and made the necessary adjustments or changes in my life to make sure that I never have a heart attack or go through an experience like that again. Now, before we continue, I want to warn people of one thing, or at least ease some concerns. 99.9% of people that are burning out do not need to reinvent their life completely. You need to make some adjustments here and there, but you don't need to reinvent your life. In my case, I had to, because there were so many things that I was doing. My beliefs, my habits, my thoughts, all kinds of different things put me in that situation, and changing the how I approach life made such a big difference to help me rebound, get off of the heart medication. I don't take it anymore because I don't need to, and live a pretty good life.
I lived in Detroit area during the recession and in the bailouts, and it was scary up there. I mean, it was straight up scary up there. So there is, I know the whole country experienced it, but experiencing that in Detroit, where the auto industry was just crippling, in the fact it shut down a good majority of the state of Michigan. I know it had huge effects on Windsor as well. And if you weren't there, I mean, people don't understand how significant that was in that area. There was nothing, there was no jobs. There was no, the government was bailing everybody and everything they possibly could out at that time. And it was, the people that made it through that recession are unscathed. They're very, very lucky. But you know, that was an event that if that's going to spiral you into a bad place, I put that high on the list of triggers for it.
Sure.
But the reality is it doesn't always take something that significant to get to that space. I see it all the time on the Facebook small business groups, on LinkedIn small business groups. People are like, oh yeah, startup hustle life. I'm going to work 100 hours a week and I have to do this to start my business. No, you don't. No, you don't. First of all, you don't.
Right.
But, but second of all, like, I get so frustrated because like, I see so many people doing this on bad advice from other people that are doing it, and the certain people can build that resilience, but the most of us can't, especially if you have other factors in your life. So let's talk about some of the things that lead to burnout.
Yeah, some of the signs that I see, and I had obviously all of them, I checked all the boxes when I went back and looked at my experience, but the people and the organizations I work with, I see common signs of how burnout can happen. And even before that, I want to define burnout for everybody, just in case they don't know what it truly means. Burnout is basically prolonged stress with fatigue. You have lack of motivation, and I'm not talking about Monday morning lack of motivation. You're not motivated in life about anything. You're not clear-headed. You're making mistakes at work. You're not in a healthy space. You feel just completely worn out and drained. And a lot of people, when they hear it and they look at it and they say, well, burnout and depression look a lot alike. And there are a lot of similarities between depression and burnout. The biggest difference between the two, however, is when you are clinically depressed, you're really not able to do anything. Where people that are burned out, they can still get up, get dressed, go to work, do the things, and they fight through it, but it's constantly a fight. So again, the burnout happens when you're overwhelmed. Your to-do list is too long. You're working those 105-hour weeks and all of that. But quite frankly, from a productivity standpoint, you're lucky if you're getting 20 hours of actual results. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the biggest challenge is for people. Each of us, and we've seen stats, and this number keeps dropping. Somebody that's working for an organization, and they're working at the classic 8-hour Henry Ford shift kind of thing. They're lucky if they're getting 4 hours of productivity out of that employee. Yeah. It's because there's interruptions, there's distractions, there's lack of resources to be able to get everything completed quickly. You're waiting on somebody. So your productivity time drops off. And, managers are like, well, how do we get more productivity out of the people? Streamline things. Make sure that what people are supposed to do is clear. Give them the clear instructions. Give them all the tools they need to do their job. Minimize the types of interruptions they have, and get out of their way. Let them do their job. And then people will get more things done in a shorter period of time. But unfortunately, as we're seeing in this workspace, and especially during this working from home situation that so many people have been thrown in for the last year and some change, is they're constantly getting interrupted. They're getting text messages, they're parked out on Zoom all day, and they're not able to get anything done. Plus, of course, we know so many people became full-time school teachers as well. So they're trying to juggle educating my kids, which coincides with when I work. I'm like, well, how does that work? So that's where we're seeing a lot of people getting up earlier in the morning to get some work done. They work with their kids for a bit, then they go back to work, and then they work into the evening, and then wash, rinse, repeat. And of course, that's not sustainable either. The great organizations that are doing everything they can to provide a healthy work environment for their employees are basically scaling back as much as they can and saying, okay, this is what you need to work on, and just do the basics, do what we need to give to our customers and what they need right now. And then once all of this sorts out and we get to whatever normal looks like, then we can revisit and look at some things. But I got to give people a lot of credit because last March 2020, we were basically told to go home in many cases, and without knowing how long we would be. And many organizations didn't have any type of remote access to speak of, and all of that. So the fact that so many people have been able to work remotely for this period of time is great, but it's going to be really an interesting dynamic. And I know it's a completely different subject, but it's going to be an interesting dynamic to see how people react to wanting to go back into their workplace versus working remotely. It's going to be really interesting to watch that dynamic play out between employers and employees, because the stats I'm seeing is they're not in alignment as far as what they want to do. And I think it's going to create some interesting synergies and dynamics when the return to work situation happens. Although they've been working for a year, they're basically returning to an office place with bad coffee and a lineup. And don't get me started on this, but it's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And so I had somebody on middle of last year that we talked about working from home, and one of the things that we talked about that I thought was so interesting was, as a leader, you have to change your mindset for people that are working at home, right? And it's the fundamental shift is going from being able to physically manage people in a space to managing outcomes. And it's two completely different modalities when you look at it, right? So managing outcomes is all about managing timelines, so making sure the work is getting done when it needs to get done, but not walking over to their desk and micromanaging that situation to make sure it's getting done, and it's all about, making sure there's quality work is being completed and staying out of the way, right? This quote goes all over the internet all the time, but you hire smart people, let smart people do smart things, and I firmly believe in that, and I believed in that in office, but I also believe in that out of office as well, because that in itself can reduce, I think, so much stress for an employee. Micromanagement and leadership is like detrimental stress for employees. Yeah. Detrimental stress. And there's plenty of studies out there that show how ineffective it really is and what it actually creates. And, and so I appreciate, that we've figured out, or a lot of organizations are starting to figure out, if I can manage the outcomes and timelines, I can be much more effective as an organization. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And I think with the studies that we've seen where, the Hartford insurance agency or company had indicated, over 60% of people have identified as burning out, and Deloitte just released a study where, those in, upper 70% and all of that. And a lot of the reason for that is lack of clarity from management on what the responsibilities were, or the micromanaging of things. And when you talk to management about it, especially with this remote work thing, the ones that are, constantly requiring people to stay connected online and on Zoom and all that good stuff with the camera on and everything else, we ask them, okay, well, why are you doing this? What's going on? Well, I don't trust my employees. And my initial response to that is then fire them. I can't do that. You don't trust your employees? Why did you hire them? You hired them, right? Why don't you trust them? Give your people the best fighting chance possible to do their job. It'll make your job a lot easier as a manager or leader. Managers and leaders, and this was a McKinsey article that I read recently, talks about, in order to help prevent burnout in your organization, the leaders have to walk the walk. You got to take care of yourself as a manager and as a leader. And there's a lot of things you can do that, trickle down, quite frankly, that makes things healthier for everybody involved. Because unfortunately, a lot of employees will behave like their managers or leaders behave. If you send that email Saturday night, 11:30 p.m. for a project that's due next week, well, your employees are thinking that's the normal time to be communicating. Well, if you're, in the Eastern time zone and you don't normally work weekends, that's pretty abusive, quite frankly. One of the things that, I established after what I like to call my year of worst case scenarios is I'm never sending an email after hours or on weekends to employees. And I'm going to politely scold them in private if I see them do the same thing. One of the clinics I worked at, there was a dietitian, and she liked to send emails at all types of days and nights because she was a night owl and all that stuff. And occasionally people would respond. And finally, in a staff meeting, I said, "Look, how many times have I emailed you on a night or on a weekend?" And they couldn't think of one. I said, "I've emailed you twice, and both of them were related to power issues in the area or storm issues." That was it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to wait. So I told the dietitian, save it in drafts or use the scheduling tool and say, deliver on Monday at 9:30 a.m. It's good.
Yep.
You won't forget to send it. It's not going to bug anybody, and you feel good. They're not getting bugged at odd hours, and everything's good. So as a leader, or even as an employee, walk the walk and, set boundaries around when you work and when you don't. And that gets harder, especially for people that are working remotely.
I think that's interesting. I love the boundaries talk, right? Because business owners, small business owners who are used to running on a tight ship already, tend to not respect boundaries in the terms of there's just too much to do and not enough hours in the day. And I absolutely love delegation. It's my favorite word because it allows me to focus on the things that are important and the things that I'm good at. And it allows me to push all the other stuff off that I know needs to get done to somebody else that is as good or better than I am at that. And subsequently my stress level goes down because I know when I get it back, it's going to be done.
Yeah. It's delegation is a beautiful thing. I was lousy at it before, and then the pendulum swung pretty much way to the other direction where anything that lands on my desk, I go, okay, who besides me could work on this? That's the first question I ask on anything that happens. And that can be dangerous. And I discovered, well, with the help of people that work for me, pretty quickly that you can overwhelm your employees if you don't keep track of what you delegate. Because as leaders, we all have faults. Everybody does. But one of leaders' common faults that I see is we're really good at delegating, but we don't necessarily keep track of how much we've delegated to individual people. So we may overwhelm them. And unless we're clear and we have meaningful check-in sessions, it doesn't have to be a meeting, but just a quick check-in session. Okay, here's all the projects or things you're working on. Okay, how are they going? And help that individual, and again, have open communication both ways to say, okay, what should be a priority? Because what's priority this week may not be the same priority next week because of customer demand, whatever the case may be. So having that free-flowing communication, not overwhelming, not all the time, but just check-ins, I think makes a big difference because otherwise you're using a CRM system to say, okay, these are all the projects I've delegated. And if you're using project management, if you're a project management-based organization, that's one thing. But for many small businesses, I'm not going to say, okay, go crazy on the Gantt charts and all that other stuff. You don't have time to do that. A Post-it note might be your way of tracking things. Great, whatever you do. But for small business owners, the realization that you can't do everything sometimes is a tough pill to swallow because you think you're a superhero and you can do everything, and you can't. And there are things that you're not good at and you shouldn't do them. Case in point, my original career was public accounting. Okay, so I did the tax seasons, auditor, all that kind of good stuff. I don't do my books. I don't. Could I? Yes. Do I? If I had hair, I'd pull it out. I don't want to do it because I did it for so long. I can't stand it. I'm like, oh, no. It's like, oh, let's do a budget review. Oh, no, let's not. It's like, let me look at the bottom line. Okay, where are we at? What are we projected to do? Okay, good. Go. Any outliers? Nope. Good. I skim financials. I'm like, no. All right, we're good. Yeah, it's like anything out of the ordinary. Nope, good, go. Because otherwise, it's like, no, I did that for so long. It's like, no, I don't want to do it anymore. So, as a small business owner, find your sweet spot. Find the things you enjoy doing, and do more of those because you're really
Yes.
good at those things. The things you're not, delegate. And I know, especially small business, like, well, that costs money. And like, you can afford, there. And I talk to outsourcing organizations all the time. Say what you want about it. If you have a situation where you don't feel like you want to use help from overseas to do things for you, that's great. It's fine. If you want to find somebody that's local, and obviously compensate them fairly. Of course, that may cost more. You have to weigh those choices, and I'm not going to judge you, and no one else should, on what your decisions are on that. But figure out what really needs to get done. Figure out the things that only you can do, that you like doing. Do
Mm-hmm.
those. And then that way you're not overwhelming yourself, because here's the thing that happens all the time. And one of the biggest signs of burnout is lack of clarity. You can't see anything. You're so fatigued and wiped out. You literally can't see. It's like, okay, there's a pencil on the floor. You're looking around. I don't see it. It's like, it's right there. Everybody else sees it. You can't see it because you lack clarity, because you're so stressed out and overwhelmed with everything. And when you don't have clarity, you're losing opportunities to see opportunities for your business, for growth, maybe new ways to do things, maybe new ventures or new clients or customers. You can have a customer walk right in your door and ask a question that's not related to your business, but they could be, potentially one of your biggest customers. And if you don't have the clarity to see, okay, what else can I help you with? There goes business out your door, and you lost it because you're so overwhelmed with taking care of everything else.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my favorite questions to ask small business owners is, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? Because they're two very, very different things, and there's a time and a place for both. And I think every small business owner has to pick which hat, which day they're going to put on and be in that place. And that goes to your clarity point, very, very big, but, it's funny to think that how many business owners I talk to, and they're like, yeah, so I go do my job all day with my crews and, or whatever we do. Right. And then I spend 4 hours every night, sending emails and doing this and doing that because I didn't have time to do it during the day. And, the first thing I'm asking them is, how are you figuring out how to be smarter in your business if you're never stopping during business hours to work on your business when things are happening? And it's so interesting to hear the multitude of excuses that spew out of their mouth. Everything from, I don't have time, I don't have the right people, I don't have the right, and all those things are a simple, well, why don't you?
Yeah, I agree. What are the things that are preventing you from doing that? And we all take on too much. Launching a business, we think we got to get everything right and do everything. You know what? It's I was at a Vegas education session, which is kind of funny to say without giggling, because like education in Vegas, it's like, I got some nuggets out of it. But one of the things that the guy that was running it said, for new business launches and all that stuff and new things, he said, you know what? As quickly as you can, put out crap 1.0. And then you're going to put out crap 2.0. And then your next product is going to be crap 3.0. And then crap 4.0. And then eventually it'll be like meh 5.1. And then eventually you'll figure out how to do things. It takes time. Understand it. It's the journey is what's important. But again, we try to take on too many things, and we switch gears all the time, which adds to a lot of stress, because our bodies, you need to have energy in order to do the work. And somebody's like, okay, I have to dedicate 4 hours every night to do the emails and all of that kind of good stuff. Well, okay, if they're sending them at, not scheduling, if they're sending them out at that point, then anybody that's receiving them is saying, okay, this person works late, then I can interact with them. So you're getting back and forth communication. Or they're like, why is this guy bugging me late at night, man? I don't want to deal with emails during the day. Okay. Well, that's why you use the scheduler and you send them out, the next day. You don't send them out at night. But also, to what avail? It's like, where's your energy level those last 4 hours? You're like, it's not there. So one of the things that I have people do, and it's an exercise for people, is figure out what your energy levels are throughout your day, every day, and match that up with the work that you have to do. Because as a small business owner, you pretty much have control of how you spend your time. You may not think you do, but you do.
You do.
Figure out where your energy levels are during the day, and then assign tasks during those times that match up with those energy levels. For me, for example, I'll peel back the curtain. And this is what my work week looks like. Because I'm a public speaker, Mondays I dedicate to looking for speaking engagements or following up with engagements that I'm working with, or trying to line up a deal with, and all that. So that's Mondays. Tuesdays tend to be intro phone calls or follow-up phone calls or podcast interviews like today. Wednesdays for my shows when I do my recording. So I know Wednesdays, recording day. Thursdays and Fridays I don't schedule in advance. Do I get things filled up in them? Sure. Things will find slots. And of course, I'm very, controlling as far as what goes in there. The reason why I don't have Thursdays and Fridays pre-scheduled is if things come up during the week, Monday, Tuesday, or even Wednesday, where I need to have a follow-up call or something, an opportunity comes up, or interviews, whatever the case may be, I've got 2 days during the work week that are pretty much a clean slate that I can fill in. And usually Thursdays for sure, the time slots that I allocate for things will get booked. Sometimes on Fridays, but I tend to be pretty protective of Fridays. So that way, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I don't have anything scheduled. Does that mean I don't do work on the weekends? No, come on. I'm a business owner. Of course you're going to do things, but you do it at a different pace. You're like, okay, let's ease in. Let's make the cup of coffee. Let's kind of sit down. Let's have a plan of attack on things. It took me a while to figure that out because I had to know what my energy levels were like. And, again, matching up the tasks that I need to do with the days that I do them has made things easier, because when you have like-minded tasks or things you need to do scheduled together, your brain doesn't have to shift gears and go, okay, I'm driving this fast, now I got to drive slower. No, you have like tasks together, you just flow through them easier. So it's not this hard left thing. Like you'll say,
Yep.
Look, I'm going to be doing this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, no, after this call, then I'm going to go, jump into a business plan review and do research on that. No, I'm not going to do that because I don't schedule my nights for things. I'll check email, I'll look at some things. Typically, it ends up being newsletters and whatnot at this time of day. But other than that, I've shaped how I do my job. And of course, it takes time. It's trial and error. Some people work much better in the evenings than they do in the mornings. And I understand that. So when you can design your days, design them the best they can to give you that elbow room to have some flexibility and free time and what I like to call me time, or, self-care time.
Yep.
Put that in every day. And then that way you won't get stressed, overwhelmed with things, and you won't burn out.
Yeah, I love that, the me time thing every day. I think that's so important. For me, guilty as charged. I like to scroll TikTok and just have 20 minutes, half an hour of stupid videos where I can laugh, and
That's good.
It's my guilty pleasure for the day. And then usually about every couple of weeks, I will break down on a Sunday and spend like 4 hours playing video games because, why not?
That's self-care. A lot of people think self-care is yoga or meditation or moments of Zen. Sure, if that works for you, awesome, go for it. But doing things you like doing is self-care. So playing video games, or sitting at the pub, or going golfing or fishing, or going out on a bike ride, or going for a long drive, or going to concerts, or watching sports on TV, or watching Netflix or whatever. That's all self-care. If you enjoy it and it brings you joy and fulfillment in your life, then yeah, do it. It makes life more full. And watching the TikTok videos and laughing your ass off and just going, okay, that was absolutely silly. Or, sometimes watching, you might say on a Sunday afternoon, you're like, you know what, I'm going to play some games, or, you know what, I'm in the mood to watch because I saw some article about, this former president back in the late 1800s. Okay, I'm going to watch a documentary about them because I didn't pay attention to history in high school. Now I'm interested in it. It's case in point. There's like,
Yep.
I don't know how I got an A in history, but I did. But because I remember it, but I don't remember it. So now I'm like, okay, that's actually interesting how those decisions lined up. I'm more curious about it. Back then, I'm like, yeah, hey, can we get?
I got a note for the test on Friday.
Yeah, exactly. So I got that. It's like, or it's like, oh man, it's like, wait a minute, the first hour is done. It's like, wait a minute, concert tickets for Bon Jovi go on sale at 10 a.m. I got to skip out of school and go get in line at Hudson's. You'll recognize that name.
Yes.
Hudson's at Summit Place Mall in Pontiac/Waterford, and and waiting in line, at 9:45 a.m. to get tickets when I'm supposed to be in school. But hey, yeah.
Well,
I got great tickets too. That was great. I was impressed. Beats doing the phone call, busy.
Oh yeah,
call busy. Things that kids these days, like, you called for your tickets. I'm like,
kids these days have no idea.
The struggle was real.
The struggle was real. Sitting in the mall, like for like the biggest concerts of the year, like literally camping in the mall for overnight and waiting in line for tickets. Yeah, that is a real thing. So all you Gen Zers out there, we appreciate you, but you have no idea the struggle was real.
Yeah. So. We're the pioneers that paved the easy way for you to obtain tickets.
So let's switch gears for just a minute here, and let's talk about some really tactile strategies that people can use to deal with burnout.
Yeah, it's important. Burnout, a lot of people feel it's a treadmill that you can't get off of, and you actually can. There's some things you can do pretty quickly that can help with your burnout. The deeper work, of course, is figuring out why you burned out in the first place. And that can take some time and may involve some therapy, quite frankly. And that's one regret that I have when my burnout situation is that I didn't seek therapy to work through it, because I think I would have worked through it a little bit faster than it took me to. I still got to the same end result, but I think it would have made things a lot easier. So some tactile things. Number one, sleep. Sleep is critical. You got to get a great night's sleep every night. And because think about it, where do you spend the most consecutive time of your day? In one spot. It's your bed. So I tell people, invest the most money you can afford in a mattress, your bedding, your pillows, everything. I live with, in my condo building where I live in, there's a couple that's a few floors away from me. And a few months ago, I saw them, they come back from the mall, and they were both carrying boxes, and they each had a pillow in the box. They paid $250 each for these pillows. They dropped $500 on 2 pillows. And I'm like, why in the world would you spend that? But then they explained to me, why, and how amazingly comfortable they are, and what great sleep they get. And knowing those people, and they have stressful jobs, but they're the most happy-go-lucky people I know. And it's because they get a good night's sleep every night, because the stress and the damage we do to ourselves on a daily basis, if you don't get a good night's sleep, your body doesn't have an opportunity to repair that damage. So guess what? Today's damage gets piled on to tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next day. And then you'll start running into some physical and mental ailments. Another thing real quick that you can do, you got to make sure you get active as best you can. I'm not telling you to become a gym rat by any stretch, but at least get a little bit more activity in. And unfortunately, with us working from home, we're not getting as much activity as we used to, because we're not walking around the office or wherever we work. Our office is our home. And unless you live in a really big place, you're not getting in as many steps as you used to. So get a little bit more activity in. There's no shortage of YouTube videos you can watch, but make sure you work with your healthcare provider so you don't injure yourself, because the last thing you want to do is hurt yourself trying a workout that you watched on YouTube and end up in the hospital. We need to leave the hospitals free for people that need to be in there, and not because you threw out your shoulder doing something. Another thing too, and as I mentioned earlier about eating the fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you got to eat healthier. But I'm not going to tell you to not eat fast food or anything like that. But I am going to suggest that you work with your healthcare provider or a dietitian or nutritionist to find out what your food intolerances are. Get tested to see what foods you're allergic to or have an intolerance to. That's important because gut bacteria, your gut tends to work at night. Works all day, but it tends to work a little bit more in the evening and when you're sleeping. And if your body has this toxin or this food that is not good for you, that your body wants to reject, then your body's using energy to try to figure out what to do with this poison, quite frankly, that's in your system. So it causes some issues, which of course will disrupt your sleep. Even though you might still be sleeping, you're still not getting the good restful sleep. So figure out what those food intolerances are. And then finally, a big thing you do, and we talked about it already, is the self-care, the me time, the playing video games or going and doing things. Schedule those things as much as you can every week. It'll harmonize your life a little bit better. And as a small business owner, I know those things get kicked by the wayside, and you can't let that happen. You have to do things in life that you enjoy doing. They can be simple. They can be an hour-long coffee meeting with your best friend, or going out and having a couple drinks after work one night, whatever the case may be. But make sure you schedule those things every week. It'll give you something to look forward to, gives you some enjoyment throughout your busy schedule, and it doesn't cost a lot. Usually a lot of these things that I see people do for self-care doesn't really cost them a whole lot of money, but for some reason they stop doing them when they're stressed, and it's the last thing you should do. So those are some tips that I know are really helpful. They've helped me, and they help a lot of people that I work with.
I love it. And they are all, at least in my experience, I don't claim to be an expert on this by any means, but just personal experience. They are all things that make such a big, big difference. I know, like, the nights that I don't get a good night's sleep, like, I wake up in the morning and I might feel rested, so to speak, but by like 1 PM, I'm like ready to like tilt my office chair back and take a nap, and so and work becomes very secondary at that point. It's just the struggle to get through the day. Food I think is easier than most people think, especially working at home. I've gotten in the habit of making myself a lunch, an actual, like, making myself lunch during the day. At some point I will step away for 20 minutes and make, I make hot sandwiches probably 3-4 days a week, or maybe a cup of soup, things like that. Like, I actually go physically take the effort to make a lunch that's a bit healthier than, the easy, well, I could just order some DoorDash or, some fatty fast food stuff, Don't get me wrong. I love a good Big Mac once in a while, but it's not every day. So, and the bed thing, so true. For a lot of years, I spent, we had the bed we could afford and it was okay. But, now that I'm older and wiser and have a few more bucks in my bank account, we got a much nicer bed, and you can totally tell the difference in the quality of sleep that I get from it. So I love those tips. It's such an important thing to realize that you're starting to see the effects of burnout before you get too deep in. And so, as a small business owner, don't be afraid to put your hand up. It's totally okay to say, you know what, I need to pause. I need to stop for a minute and take care of myself. In the rescue world, they say things along the lines of, in EMT school, one of the big things that they talk about very, very early on is scene safety. And why do they talk about scene safety? Because if you walk into a scene and become another victim, well, then you're just in just as bad a place as the person you're there to save. And then you can't help anybody. So it's the same thing in the business world, especially being an owner or, the leader of the business. You have to keep yourself in a good place where you can continue to help your business and the people associated with it. So thank you so much for all those tips. Those, I think, are really, really good, easy ways for business owners to help, break that cycle a little bit. So at this point in the show, I always like to leave the show with some final thoughts, just something that people can take away and really apply, today, tomorrow, and do something with. So I leave the floor to you for your final thoughts based on what we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I can leave people with today, especially in this working from home type of world, and for many small business owners, we've been doing it longer than this lockdown and pandemic situation, is have a firm, hard stop to when you work. And so, okay, this is the end of my workday. I mean, the Flintstones did it. Fred Flintstone, horn went off, he slid down the tail, yelled yabba dabba doo, punched out, and went home. We don't have a time clock usually. We don't punch out. And we need to. We literally need to say, okay, this is the end of my workday, and make sure you do it a few hours before you go to bed. Don't do it and literally climb, shut down the laptop, put it on the floor and hit your pillow. No, you need to have some buffer time to kind of unwind from your day and get yourself in a more relaxed, rested state. So when you go to sleep, you're already giving yourself a fighting chance to have a good night of restful sleep. Because if you go, full on, full energy working, you crash into bed, you're not going to get that good night's sleep, which will just impact your ability to get your work done. And when you have good restful sleep, you have more clarity and you feel better, and you're going to be more productive, and you'll have more clarity on everything you do.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Where can people find you?
Best way to find me is on breakfastleadership.com. That's my website. And I'm on most of the social media channels under the letter B and then Fast Leadership. Or if you look up hashtag Breakfast Leadership, you can find me in a variety of different places.
Fantastic. And you got a new book that just came out too, as well.
I do. It's titled, ironically, surprise, surprise, Burnout Proof. And it talks about how to burnout proof your life. The book was actually ready in early 2000. Or 2020, excuse me. No, that would have been really early. That was before my burnout. I was like, I had a premonition, right? A burnout book. But no, in early 2020, but then the pandemic hit, and I thought, well, I'm going to hold off on it a little bit. And then when I started to see all the working from home challenges, I said, okay, the book's not done. I got to add a chapter. So I added a chapter about working from home burnout and things you can do to prevent that as well. But I go through a lot of steps, and a lot of them we talked about today. But there's some more in-depth steps on things you can do right away to ease the burnout and design a life that's free from burnout. And that's really important, because you can do that. You can live a life that's free from burnout. But you have to take some steps that are easily done. But like any habit, they're kind of hard sometimes to implement. But if you put your mind to it and the effort to it, you can design a life that's free from burnout. It's everything that I used to design my life, and I'm really productive. My schedule is, pretty full, but I'm not burned out because I know how to adjust accordingly and live the life that I want to live and still get to do some amazing things. So you can find the book. It's called Burnout Proof, and it's on Amazon. Barnes & Noble carries it as well.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure there's a link to that in the show notes as well for those of you that are catching this on the replay. And awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. This is like super, super informative, because I am guilty as charged workaholic. I know I am. And, I love a lot of the little tips that you said, setting boundaries and really building some of that structure into your workday. That's things that I'm constantly struggling with and working on. And I know, by far I'm not alone in that struggle. So I think there's a lot of great things here that people can take away and really start to apply to create, ultimately a better tomorrow. So I really appreciate your time. All of you that were on the show, watching us live today, I really appreciate you joining us. As always, you can catch us on YouTube, the Winning Tactics Podcast. You can catch us on all the major podcast networks as well. And we put the replay of the show out every Thursday. But we are here on Facebook, LinkedIn, and twitch.tv every Tuesday night, usually around 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. So come join us and hang out. We appreciate you, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Well, that wraps up yet another episode of the Winning Tactics Podcast. You can find Adam on both the LinkedIn and Facebook platforms. And to support the show and ensure the success of the podcast, would you kindly consider visiting Patreon.com/Adam Sinkus? We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, from the Winning Tactics Podcast, remember, culture is how your team behaves when no one is looking. Take good care, and thanks for listening.